And welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Going for Two, presented by our dear friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I'm joined here by my colleague and friend, Bryan Fischer. Bryan, I see the lower third on your screen here says D1 Ticker, but I'm here. Industry sources are telling me that you also have another gig now. Let's tell the people about that.
Well, still with the tickers. I want to make that very clear. Still doing this podcast. Still have HeadCoachU with Bronco Mendenhall still going. Episode 2 coming out certainly by the time you are listening to this here podcast. And yeah, I'm excited to announce that I'm one of Fox's new national college football writers. We're covering the sport, as need be. First column went up on Monday, and so it's excited to have a new writing home there with Fox. It's really thrilled to not only join the company, but I think the coverage that they have planned, not just for this college football season, but beyond, is really exciting.
I'm happy for you. I mean, I'm happy for consumers because this is a sign that Fox is staffing up a little bit more. I've written about this earlier. Their web presence for college football has not been what it used to be after some other corporate changes. It looks like there's a little bit of a change in direction there. So it's wonderful. And it's wonderful to have a good chance to read you instead of just listening to you and watching you and seeing the backdrop there, which is fun. And it's a fun time, I think, to get started writing again, because boy, this was a profoundly stupid weekend. I don't know, like I would assume that Commissioner Gill down in New Orleans at the Sun Belt has to be like the happiest guy in the world after the past 36 hours, right? I hope he's everyone at Sun Belt HQ just has to be ecstatic because you knock out 3 gigantic premier programs. You get College Game Day the coming week. You're the toast of every college football hipster. And your strategy for realigning your conference has already immediately paid gigantic dividends. Like, what could possibly be better than that?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I wrote about in my first column was the Sun Belt. I mean, it was just an excellent weekend, for the league itself, and I think to your point, really reaffirmed, just kind of the strategies and everything that was going into, making sure those universities fit, and I think at the end of the day, too, I did talk with Commissioner Gill. It's funny because one of the games that he was going to attend was originally supposed to be on Friday, and it ended up getting moved because of TV to Saturday. So he was actually supposed to be at that App State game, but he didn't end up making it. So he was actually listening along, celebrating and hooting and hollering as App State pulled that off, listening to the Aggie Radio Network, which was a bit of a different tone than I think the Mountaineers did. I was actually driving down to the BYU Baylor game to take that in person on Saturday, and was listening to the Mountaineers radio call on the Varsity app, and just the excitement. The host there mentioned, I mean, it was kind of the 1B to the of course App State Michigan game of being 1A in terms of marquee wins in school history, but it didn't stop there. I mean, I think we were all kind of glued to the television watching Georgia State pull off the upset against Nebraska. We'll talk a little bit about the Cornhuskers a little bit later, but I mean, just a terrific day. And then really the marquee win, I think it almost got overshadowed a little bit just because of all that was going on in college football and even the NFL, which was crazy on Sunday as well. But Marshall, to go into a hallowed venue like Notre Dame Stadium and to pull off a win like that against a team in the top 10, really high hopes for the Irish, even though I think the offense wasn't quite what it wanted to be these first 2 games. You would have thought, especially after playing Ohio State pretty good, I think in the first half of that game, just to pull off a real shocker in their first year in the league. I mean, just a terrific cap to what was really a Fun Belt weekend.
Let's start first with the Notre Dame Marshall game. One of the things that I think is, I don't know, maybe funny. I don't know if funny is exactly the right word, but we can use funny as somebody that does like to poke fun at Notre Dame sometimes. Is that for being as historic and elite of a program as Notre Dame is, with all of the cachet that comes with that, they have some pretty hilarious losses as this blue blood entity, right? This is a team that is, I believe, winless against UConn. That in recent memory has lost to Tulsa. Has lost to South Florida, I believe. Am I forgetting any other, like, especially funny Notre Dame losses. I know they lost to Cincinnati, but that wasn't that funny because lots of people lose to Cincinnati. They're winless against Oregon State, and now this is one of those things. And I know that you can look at this and think, look, wait, Notre Dame's quarterback got injured. He's out for likely the entire season now. Notre Dame wasn't super healthy coming into this game. I think there was a weird pick six, so you can look at but still, you should never lose. And they lost in a way that is not historically how you would expect a modern Marshall to spring one of these upsets. Like, maybe I'm skewed a little bit, but if you told me that Marshall knocked off some big time power program, I would assume the score was in the 40s, not like both teams' offenses scored like 18 points. So very exciting for Marshall. They probably should be a top 25 program at this point, but Notre Dame still has like Clemson and they've got there's like 2 or 3 other like big programs left on the schedule. Like they might miss a bowl game, right? Like that's not impossible.
It's fascinating to see how just kind of the tenor surrounding the Irish program has changed so dramatically just after one loss. And I mean, it's tough for Marcus Freeman. I mean, the first head coach at Notre Dame to start 0-3 and 3 second half blown leads. I mean, that's not exactly what you want to do, especially this one being his first home opener. You would have thought, all right, we're going to set kind of the tenure. We're going to get everybody kind of back and pointed in the right direction. And then, I mean, they were thoroughly outplayed. I mean, Marshall really put them behind the 8 ball pretty much, all game long. And it kind of felt like it was not just like they're hanging around. No, it's like the Irish better get things going, or else they're going to lose this game. And then, down the stretch, I mean, Marshall just kind of took control, and it was just very impressive. Hats off to Charles Huff and everybody there, at that Marshall program. They turned over the roster quite a bit, kind of from year 1 to year 2. And I mean, it's just going into South Bend and pulling off a shocker like that. I mean, you got to give them credit, not just for the game plan that they had, but how tough they were, how physical, how they bounced back. If Notre Dame, threw a counterpunch, Marshall was right there. And, it was definitely one of the surprising results of the weekend. And I think, like you said, I mean, they've got Clemson, they've got USC, they've got Stanford still on the schedule. They're playing Cal this week. And even their favorite at home, I mean, that's, to be fair, Cal, really escaped against UNLV this past week. And so
Cal sucks, but and they've got BYU in Las Vegas, which is going to be a home game for the Cougars. Secretly, like now top 12, top 10, maybe BYU coming in at that point. It's not great.
I think they'll still end up getting into a bowl game, but it's like, you kind of thought, all right, well, they played Ohio State, so close, maybe this is, they're turning a corner. Maybe they can figure some things out on offense. You know what, they're looking at the schedule. All right. You're thinking, all right, maybe they can get back into year 6. And then this just completely have popped that bubble. And it's going to be a struggle. I mean, their starting quarterback is now out for the season. They've got to find some answers on offense. I think the offensive line is not playing quite as well as it did a year ago. I think they've got some holes in defense. I mean, it's just kind of like as much energy as the program had going into the year. I mean, there was a lot of pieces done about Marcus Freeman and his kind of place and what he's done since taking over there. And there are a lot of good things that he's done, but at the end of the day, it's all about results on the field. And this kind of cast a shadow a little bit over all those pretty puff pieces from the off season.
To say that it's a little bit, I think would be kind. Like this is, I don't know if they're in like full meltdown mode here, but yeah, you don't get to do the GQ cover and talk about a new program here when you are now 0-2 and staring down a complete offensive identity crisis and having to redo everything, and with things looking very difficult up ahead.
I mean, you mentioned that BYU game. I mean, you remember the kind of video and photo shoot that they had in Las Vegas to announce that was part of their Shamrock series. Like, you thought, oh, all right, so this is kind of the cool Marcus Freeman, right? And now he's dealing with it, and his staff is going to have to deal with it. I think there was a lot of euphoria about a lot of those guys remaining, when Brian Kelly left, but now you're kind of thinking, maybe it wasn't so bad if some of those guys would left and we get some new blood into the program. And, we'll see. I think they are a little bit behind the 8 ball. There's not really that explosive receiver that can kind of change the game. They've been missing that for a couple of years. That's been one area where they need to beef up in recruiting, but it's going to be fascinating to kind of follow this because, as we know, win or lose, Notre Dame is a story in college football. And it is certainly one of these stories this past weekend.
I want to talk a little. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways we could branch off into this here. We could talk about the game that you went to, but before we get into something local, stepping back from Marshall, but going back to the Sun Belt there for a second. It's easy for us, and especially an idiot like me, I think, to dramatically overreact to limited data set. And we have 2 weeks, and based on the 2 weeks of data, everyone sucks except for Georgia, Wake Forest, Kentucky, and Syracuse, right? And I think I got that right. But I mean, obviously, for one conference at the high end, nobody in the G5 really experiences like what the Sun Belt has had right here. Are we collectively overreacting to this, given that there's going to be a different storyline now in a week, and that Nebraska and Notre Dame could potentially be terrible? Or does this signify something a little bit more significant, you think, for the Sun Belt, if nothing else, for the rest of this year, to pick up wins like this, and have Coastal still as a fringe top 25 team as well?
Well, Coastal actually struggled quite a bit with, I believe, Gardner Webb this past
Oh,
weekend. But
yeah.
I mean, you look at the Sun Belt, and they've kind of been building towards moments like this. I mean, they've always been a challenging out. I think from a recruiting perspective, from a development perspective, they've gotten transfers down from the Power Five level. Chase Bryce, the App State quarterback, a great example, certainly saved Clemson's bacon in a year that they won the national title. Didn't really work out for him as the Duke starter, but he's found a home, made some big time throws, not only in that game against A&M, but the week prior against North Carolina. And I think what it really kind of reaffirms to me is that these are programs kind of building for success. They really want to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, that they've hired great coaches. I mean, that's a bit of an underrated factor, I think, with the Sun Belt. It's just how even with guys, getting picked off and going to Power Five programs, they've been able to pretty effortlessly, for a lot of cases, transition to new guys coming in and sending them along their way. So, look, App State's a great example. I mean, you had Scott Satterfield, really helped build that program as they transitioned into the FBS, got some big marquee wins over Power Five opponents himself. Eli Drinkwitz comes in and wins as well, gets the Missouri job. And, I think that the same is true with Coastal. Jamie Chadwell's a name we're going to hear quite a bit this coaching carousel if Coastal has another good season. And I think it's the same all around the league. Billy Napier choosing to stay in the Sun Belt, for a couple of years, not jump to an Auburn, not jump to some of these other schools, wait for the right opportunity to come along at Florida. I think it does speak to how seriously a lot of these universities take football, how much they want to invest in a lot of their programs, how much the fan support kind of really drives a lot of those athletic department decisions. And it's paying off in wins like this. And it wasn't too long ago that this was the worst FBS conference, but they've made it a priority to invest in football. And you're seeing the payoff in weekends like this.
It is a good point, and it's. I don't like to get too caught up about the which conference is better discourse. But you're particularly because some of this can be really transient. Like the example that I think of was, it wasn't that long ago that there was a minute where the conventional wisdom was that the Pac-12 had either the best group of coaches in all of college football or the second best. This was, I want to say, right when Arizona hired Rich Rodriguez. Oregon was cooking. USC was cooking-ish. Stanford was at the peak of Stanford's powers. There wasn't really a too many weak links. And then, of course, a lot of those hires didn't pan out. Money didn't work. Recruiting didn't work. What have you? Most of those guys left after 3 years. And now the conventional wisdom, and one that's borne out by most advanced stats, is this is the worst Power 5 conference. And that change happened in like 5-6 years. I was actually just thinking about this because last week, this is partly for a story, partly because I'm just a degenerate. I fired up my old Xbox and was playing through some NCAA football 2014, which is based on the 2013 rosters. And in there, the Sun Belt is overwhelmingly the worst conference. And the ratings and the infrastructure for Sun Belt institutions relative to Conference USA or even the MAC, by and large, and accurately depicted where things were. Now, I think it is not only reasonable to say Sun Belt has completely eclipsed Conference USA, which would have been not true 4 years ago or even 3 years ago. I think there's a real question to say, in 3 years, is this a better football league than the American? And is it a better all sports league than the American, considering what the Sun Belt can bring to the table in soccer and in softball and in baseball? I mean, in basketball, I don't think that's close. I think the American throws what the current Sun Belt into a garbage can. But in other sports, that's a different kind of conversation. And if that's true, then maybe we should interrogate whatever assumptions we might have about what the Mountain West looks like or what the current Big 12 looks like, because everyone, I feel like, is one inspired athletic director, one rich donor, and one coaching hire away from vaulting into a completely different station. And some of those Sunbelt programs really hit on multiple one of those in a row. Some places didn't, but I mean, if we knew exactly what 2026 looked like, extra points would be a hell of a lot more expensive.
I mean, look at Louisiana and how they've kind of
Yeah,
benefited. I mean, they've built up facilities. They've gotten naming rights for their stadiums. You know, like it's been an entire enterprise, and a lot of it focused on football. But you mentioned soccer. I mean, this is one of the powerhouse leagues now. You know, they've added national championship programs, and you know, I think they're going to be really
literal
competitive.
national championship programs.
So I think they're going to be quite competitive in a lot of those other sports, and they've definitely benefited. I think the last decade or so, you know, just like the SEC has, just in terms of population shifts. You know, well, not all those kids out of Atlanta can go to an SEC school, and if they want to stay somewhat close, or they want to go away for college and then kind of come back a little bit closer to home, there's a lot of Belt programs there. You know, I think they more than anything, I think understanding the universities, a lot of these college towns that they're in has helped tremendously for a lot of the coaches that have had success finding the right kind of people. And you know what, they've I mean, it's funny. I mean, Georgia Southern, you know, we thought for years and years and years, you know, associated them with you know, that triple option, but you know, you just saw them going up and down the field there in Nebraska, you know, throwing the ball all over the yard with Kyle Van Treese. I mean, that was you know, quite a performance, and they've been able to change and adapt and kind of you know, make changes where they're needed. And it's fun to watch it. And I think that closing the gap you know, with the American is going to be very interesting, even just this year. You know, I mean, this is a league that if somebody kind of goes, you know, an 11-1, 12-1, and wins the league, there's a potential, just given the amount of Power Five victories that everybody's wrapped up, even in the East division alone. You know, you could think, you know, maybe they are the kind of Group of Five bid Steelers that can wrestle it away from the American or even the Mountain West.
Um, I want to shift something here because I don't have a good segue for this. I want to very briefly talk about the game that you went to, and part of that is because I went to bed in the third quarter. Because
I thought about texting you and just saying, you know, you should have stayed up, but
I, I'm,
I
I'm sure
totally understand.
I'm sure I should have. You know, I got to be honest. The game that I was watching, it looked extreme. This is BYU Baylor, and if you're listening here, looked very violent. It didn't. The 2.5 quarters that I watched, I wouldn't say this was exceptionally well played on both sides of the ball, but certainly exciting. But I don't get paid to watch every single one of those anymore. And at that point, because it was, you know, midnight 30 God's time zone, I went to bed. I apparently missed quite a banger. Was it double overtime that this went to?
I believe
BYU wins 26-20. You had special teams hijinks. You had a couple of big broken plays. You had the emotional redemption story of a kicker, and a gigantic win. What were your impressions, both of I guess of that on the field, and what might be maybe a very unique rivalry? Even feels like a weird word for it, because by all indications, these teams like each other too much to be really rivals, which feels like that isn't possibly sustainable.
friendly rivals for sure. Like I do feel like there needs to be some ecclesiastical trophy that they can battle for, or something that can really put a stamp on Big 12 rivalries. Because you know, I think it is funny because was talking to somebody the other day, just how, like, you know, when you do move to some new leagues, how it does take time to kind of develop that. But you know, it does feel like maybe BYU and Baylor will have a little bit of rivalry because you know, the Bears, you know, won in Waco last year, you know, pretty convincingly. Kalani Sitake kind of said, you know what, this is going to be a bit of a measuring stick game, not just in terms of progress we've made as a program, but you know, going into the league next year in terms of hey, that's the Big 12 champ. There's who we got to measure ourselves up. And I was very impressed by the Cougars in particular, just along the lines of scrimmage. I mean, they've got the guys that are very long and lengthy and 6'7" and 6'8", and not just the tackles out there, but you know, the defensive line, the linebackers, they were flying around, and you know, was very much an evenly matched game. I think the difference was Jaron Hall at quarterback. You know, that was you know, the Baylor their quarterback just did not kind of make the throws that you expected. They were both teams really unable to run the ball. But you know, I was very impressed by BYU. They looked like they belonged in the Big 12, and you know, getting the wins as they did. They missed the kick, they go into overtime, but they make a defensive stand kind of at the end and punch it in. It was just a big win, for everybody there. And I think it was a late night. I mean, they ended up playing on Sunday. Both schools, probably not thrilled at that, but it was a very late night. Fans rushed the field, and that was the first top 10 win that they've had since 1990. So a big thing for the program there.
Wait,
And
that can't be right. They beat
top 10 home
Oklahoma.
win.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of the
Sorry, should have
Oklahoma.
clarified. They Kalani, I guess 2018, they beat Wisconsin, which was ranked in the top 10. So they've done it before,
Yeah.
but at home, it's been a while there in Provo. So you can understand them rushing the field. And I mean, I actually did ask some of the staff members there at BYU if they even considered painting the Big 12 logo on the field for this one, but they declined. But it was a good showing. I think as they kind of go into the league and really build momentum. I mean, this is still a very difficult schedule. They play at Oregon this week. They've got Arkansas coming to town in mid-October. So the schedule's still tough enough to where even a New Year's Six bowl it might be out of reach, if they lose a couple of tough games. But this is a very encouraging sign in terms of making sure you're ready to compete. I think if you look at Utah, a couple miles to the north, they were not quite there in terms of depth and building along the lines, making that transition from the Mountain West to the Pac-12. But over time, that they built it up, and I think that's something that this program has kind of said, in the back of our minds, we got to be right there, and they certainly were on Saturday against Baylor.
I am also not buying BYU as a championship contending program. And a big part of that is I'm always concerned about their depth, especially because I feel like BYU hasn't gone through an entire year with the quarterback not missing time since the Paleolithic era. But I will say the depth on this roster now compared to where it was 4 years ago, much better place.
Well, I mean, they missed their top two receivers were out for this game, and
still do it, yeah.
And they still the third string wide receiver ended up throwing a touchdown pass, made some great plays along the sideline. So they have guys that stepped up, but I think that depth component is certainly where when you're talking about just consistently having to play these games, especially late in the season, late October into November, that depth certainly matters, and that's something that BYU will come to find out.
Did you get a cougar tail when you were there?
You know what? I saw everybody talking about it because of the broadcast, and I did not. Although I feel like I should have gone downstairs and gotten one. I had no idea I had no idea about the concept. I had to kind of Google it once I got back, and I kept seeing everything. But I'll let you fill everybody in terms of how good they are.
No, so here's the thing: I've never had one either because I've actually only covered Y games on the road or on neutral sites. My wife, when she was a student there, worked in the catering department and helped make them. Oh. And I am told, this is one of the things in this market that people brag about. Next time you go, if you cover another one, somebody should go downstairs and bring one up, or somebody on football operations staff should bring one up there. It is, as I understand it, just a maple bar, but quadrupled in size. It's a big axe, a very large maple log. And during the broadcast, you see this because they were basically passing it around the stands. It says the Mormon equivalent of puff, puff, pass, where you're just taking a bite and passing it around. So was that the most hygienic thing? Don't tell my ecclesiastical authorities I know what puff, puff, pass is. Maybe not so hygienic, but if you have one of these for yourself or splitting it with somebody that maybe has passed a COVID test recently, I'm told they're very good. Something to think about next time you're in the press box. You know what else is very good, Brian?
You know what? It might be our sponsor, Home Field Apparel.
That's exactly right. It is our sponsor, Home Field Apparel, because Home Field Apparel makes extremely good, comfortable, officially licensed vintage apparel, whether that's T-shirts, whether that's sweatpants. We're getting close to sweatpants season up here in Chicago. Today was in the mid 60s. Actually, I had to wear a hoodie. They make hoodies too, and all manner of apparel, right? And what's great about Home Field is that it isn't just that the shirts are extremely soft and comfortable, and they are flattering if you are shaped like I am, if you look like a person that enjoys exercise and also enjoys eating an entire pizza in one sitting. Home Field helps. But the designs are not just the same three things you see in every university bookstore. It's all the weird logos from the 1960s that people tried to hide, that the CLC is not trying to throw everywhere in the world. Home Field got them, and they look great. great conversational pieces. Great if you want to show that you are a more sophisticated fan than everybody else. Today, I'm wearing a shirt to talk to celebrate a team that I think we're going to talk about here in a second, Nebraska. It's a shirt that says Bug Eaters because that's what Nebraska used to be. And Bryan is wearing Joseph the Appalachian State Mountaineer, which is a delight. An example of the kind of shirt that I would buy. If more of you cheapskates subscribe to this newsletter so I could spend more money on t-shirts instead of things like infrastructure and travel. I'm kidding. You're not all cheapskates. I love all of you. If you want to go buy some home field stuff, which if you haven't done it at this point, after we've been showing for these guys for like 7 months, I don't know what to tell you other than please buy some home field stuff and then buy a subscription to Extra Points. If that's you, use promo code Extra Points, all one word. Save 15% off your first order. They've got just about every single school you could possibly care about, and they're going to be announcing some more fun refreshes and new G5 programs over the coming months. Find it all at homefieldapparel.com. Also, friends, we are in the process of selling out our ad inventory for the rest of September. We have only a couple of slots left in early October as well on the Extra Points newsletter. If you want to reach 11,000 and growing diehard sports fans, college sports thought leaders, administrators, media executives, reporters, the whole shebang, as well as thousands of listeners here on Going for Two, drop me a note at matt@extrapointsmb.com. The sales package is cheaper than you might think. I would love to as enthusiastically shill for your thing as we do for our friends at Home Field Apparel. I wanted to bring out the Nebraska shirt here because, Bryan, before we wrap up here, I think we do need to talk about Scott Frost Day. The first coaching firing of this season. It is pretty rare to fire a coach before October 1st if there isn't a scandal involved. And it's, I think, especially shocking that Nebraska did this now because it was going to be like, what, $7 million cheaper if they had waited just 2.5 weeks? That feels a little bit fiscally irresponsible, though I'm sure that Trev Alberts is not dipping into the general scholarship fund to pay this. I'm sure that Larry the Cable Guy and 3 other rich people in Nebraska got together to go end this right now. But it does feel pretty surprising. And I don't know if accelerating the coach firing timetable this quickly. I know the UConn made a decision on a similar timetable last year. I don't know if that's like good governance. Not that I don't think Scott Frost should have been fired, but you know what I mean? Like this is very soon to do it.
Well, Clay Helton was pretty much almost to the day. It was fired, by USC, and ends up being the final nail in the coffin for Scott Frost. So maybe a little bit, the coaching cycle coming full circle there. But you're right. I mean, it would have been $7.5 million of savings, which I think really around the industry, especially after the way that Northwestern loss happened. How they played an FCS team so close last week. It felt like everybody knew where this was headed. And I think that's kind of why Trev Alberts, ultimately ended up making the change. I mean, the support there just had evaporated for Scott Frost. I think there was, a lot of people wanted him to do well. He was a beloved alum, had, those ties to the glory days where the school was winning national championships, and everybody kind of thought this was a home run hire. I mean, he led UCF from no wins to, an undefeated season, and, kind of had the exciting offense. And you thought, all right, some more recruiting ties to the state of Florida would have been great, because that really did power them back in the 90s in terms of some of their marquee players. And you just thought this was perfectly set up for him to win. And I was actually asking a couple of coaches around, and they all kind of thought the same thing. They thought this should have worked, and it didn't. And I think ultimately Nebraska, whether it's paying that extra $7.5 million, I mean, a lot of it was just simply, it's time. We got to move on. And Trev Alberts kind of spoke to that a little bit on Sunday, at the press conference. They're going to pay Scott Frost the full $15 million buyout. They're not going to try to negotiate anything or cut any corners. This is a school that's building a $160+ million football facility. So I think they got some change lying around for it. But at this point, it's really just kind of about the team to kind of salvage things. And I think that is kind of the underrated storyline that probably is not getting reported all that much. I mean, that sellout streak that dates back to 1962, everybody in the department is so invested in keeping that thing going. They don't want it to end under their watch. And I think, losing to a Georgia Southern, can kind of understand where the ticket sales might be slow, how much more effort you got to get to, get people out to games, and I think that was a contributing factor, just kind of lifting this cloud out from over the program. Going to be some great Big 8 memories this week with Oklahoma coming to town. But beyond that, like when in Indiana or, the Rutgers, I actually don't know who their schedule is, but, when Northwestern or Iowa or some of these Big Ten teams come into play and it's late in the season and there's still that specter of Scott Frost saying, are you really going to make the drive down from Omaha to go to attend a game when you can watch it on TV? Like that's kind of some of the other pressures that I think the athletic department was dealing with in making this move now, and does set up for a very active coaching cycle. I think this is going to be one of the marquee jobs, that is going to be open. I think everybody kind of expects Auburn to be the other one, but when you can get out into the market a little bit earlier, you can do some more research, you can get things going, and we'll see the ultimate direction. I know everybody's got their names, but I'm fascinated to see really how Nebraska moves forward, because they got a lot going for it. They're in the Big Ten, so they're cashing those big checks. We mentioned the facilities piece. There's a pretty hefty NIL operation there, that they've got going on. So I feel like Nebraska is well positioned, and it's going to be very curious to see what direction they go in terms of Scott Frost's replacement.
I want to. A couple of things, I think, in response to that. I understand the idea here that after the Northwestern game, you decide, okay, this is untenable, and maybe it took 2 weeks just to raise the last bit of money. I think I'm coming around to the idea that if you making a decision, you have to fire somebody by week 3, you should have fired them last year. Because right, and especially because the major argument for not firing him last year was to save some money, which would make sense. Scott obviously means a lot to a lot of people within the Nebraska community. So to cut bait after 3 weeks, I feel like shows that you weren't that committed to that decision in the first place. Either execute that strategy, see it all the way through. I mean, candidly, I don't know if there's a big difference in the candidate pool Nebraska is going to attract in September 15th versus October 2nd. It's the same 10 guys. I don't think anybody else they're competing with is likely to make fire somebody by then. But it's not my money, right? If I'm somebody who's rich enough that I can write a $800,000 check to help the pool to give Nebraska a 2-week head start on trying and failing to hire Campbell, great, you can do that. The other point there, I think, is super fascinating about this idea of how good is this job, and everything that you mentioned there makes a ton of sense. This is a program that has I think slept on sophisticated NIL operation. Open Doors is as tied to Nebraska as anything else. Huddle is down the street, like in terms of not just like collectives, which Nebraska has, but in terms of like NIL data and NIL expertise, and like the department that was really first to market there. That's Nebraska. That is something that they are selling and unquestionably can continue to sell in recruiting. The fact that it hasn't maybe worked is maybe a data point that NIL is not everything if everything else isn't working out, right? But like you do have that. You've got the Big Ten checks, you got a gigantic brand, you got a gigantic stadium, you got a gajillion fans, and you have good facilities. You're not going to win a national championship in Nebraska. And this is something that I think the coastal and Midwestern and Southern college football media realized much quicker than Nebraska did, and certain Nebraska fans and Nebraska's, I'll just say it, legendarily Homer local media contingent. At this point, I think expectations are going to be closer to right-sized. But I don't look at anything that Wisconsin or Iowa have done over the last 10 years and think Nebraska can't do that. Nebraska's budget is pretty close to Wisconsin's. In-state high school football in Nebraska, despite being a smaller state, it's pretty comparable to Wisconsin. It's often better than Iowa's. Nebraska's been able to recruit in California. They've been able to recruit in Texas on some level, depending on who they hire. Maybe you get more aggressive in Ohio. I guess the question is, are you willing to, the right guy, are you willing to come here? Probably need a little bit of time to rebuild the roster. I don't think this is a plug and play situation, and be okay with winning Capital One bowls. Because if you are, and if you want to come and make $7 million and be ranked 18 and make the Capital One Bowl, which is what made Nebraska fans lose their minds a decade ago. I think that is attainable, and you shouldn't apologize for having those expectations, and you can do that. If that's not something that you're okay with, then well, I don't know what to tell you, man. Unless you're gonna flood some rivers and create coastal property in Nebraska that doesn't exist. That's to me that's the big question. Like Nebraska fans think they're getting Urban Meyer. Like, no, stop that. But
Yeah, I would disagree. I would push back a little bit on that. I
yeah,
think expectations among the fan base have definitely become more realistic than they were, not only when Scott Frost was hired, but kind of even before that. I think they understand that this is not a national championship winning program, but at the same time, you mentioned Nebraska, Wisconsin. I mean, that they're not only conference peers, but Northwestern's been to the Big Ten title game, two out of the last 4 years. So like they can have that level of success. You can make conference title games, and with a 12-team playoff, you know what? Sneaking in there as a 12 seed, like that's not completely unrealistic. And now winning the national title, yes, and I think the fan base has understood that. But this is a passionate fan base. They want Big Red to do well, and more than anything, they just want consistency. I think it's just frustration really over how things have gone really ever since letting Frank Solich go and firing Bo Pelini is like that they would like a head coach to kind of be the right type of figurehead and just win decent games, beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. Like there's no reason you should be losing to Illinois as much as Nebraska has these last couple of years. There's no reason that in close games in the fourth quarter, you continually make mistakes. Special teams, like it has been a disaster the last couple of years, and it has not gotten any better. Like it's just the consistency of the same mistakes playing out time after time and not getting fixed. I think that you really has driven the frustration up the wall, not only just among the fan base, but certainly the administration. That's why they pulled this move and are eating the additional $7.5 million. I mean, this is really I think still an attractive job, for a lot of those reasons that you listed, but it's also I think understanding the new landscape of college football. This is going to be a new Big Ten. They're going to be playing USC and UCLA a little bit more. I think divisions are obviously kind of going to go away, but at
yeah.
the same time, there's no reason to think that Nebraska, with its history, with its resources, with a good coach, just being average Nebraska, cannot consistently beat, a Maryland and a Rutgers and a Northwestern like that. That's where they need to at least get back to start with, and then we can start talking about higher expectations, which I think Nebraska fans hold out hope for one day, but they're realistic at where the program is right now. And I think just given the market itself, where really there's only Auburn, and a lot of coaches view that with, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, just because of the alignment issues there at the administration. You're going to get that at Nebraska. I do think having
Yeah.
Trev Alberts, somebody who has that link to the past, that is very good with boosters. I mean, he's been an AD for a long time before taking that job there in Lincoln. And he knows what he's doing in terms of running a football program. He knows what it looks like to win at the highest level. I think that can be a benefit for the next head coach working with somebody like that. And so I think it does make for a very unique search, just in terms of where we're at in college football and where kind of Nebraska is at on this kind of wheel of spinning doom that they've been on the last 4 or 5 years.
That and the wheel of doom's been longer. I would imagine, for as much as I've teased this fan base, some of that deserved, some of that admittedly probably not. It would have to be just spectacularly frustrating to root for this program because, to your point, it's been the same mistake. And the mistakes of the Riley era and of the Pelini era and of the Callahan era and of this era are not the same mistakes. Nebraska has been bad in different and unique ways through all 4 of those. But the way that they have been bad and struggled in this era specifically has been exactly the same. And that would be maddening.
It's
Right?
just like Iowa right now with their offense, like the same frustrations there that are present in Iowa City. It just like, how can we continue to put this product out in the field and not change? It's like the old joke about the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. Nebraska knows that all too well. Iowa, they know that all too well. I mean, it almost feels like it's kind of inherent in terms of the Big Ten West at this point. But a lot of these programs, you can sense the frustration in the fan base because these fans are getting smarter. They're watching videos, like they're seeing these breakdowns. They understand that in college football nowadays, the fans themselves are much more educated, and to see these mistakes play out time after time after time, it does get extra frustrating for them.
I do not know who ends up getting this particular job. At this point, any of the names you're going out there, this is just something that an agent has texted to a couple of national reporters and thrown out. Ask me in 3 or 4 weeks. The one thing I would say is, like, I feel confident that whoever that they decide to bring on, or even go internal if the program rebounds a little bit, will lose in a different way. And hopefully for them, they win more often than they have been. But like, I feel pretty confident that it's not going to be the Scott Frost era again and again and again. We have kind of a weird week coming in here, recording this here on a Monday, because I am headed to DC tomorrow morning. I'm going to be there doing some serious professional journalism. I will come back on Thursday, so recording there would be a little bit difficult. I'll be on the road. Are you going on the road again this weekend to go for any games, or where are you going to be the next few days?
No, I looked at the slate this Saturday, and I said, you know what, this is a good time to be at home. It's just kind of one of those weeks, and it kind of was last week in terms of, you know what, there's not those marquee games, but that's when the chaos happens, and I kind of feel like we might get the replay of that this weekend, but nothing kind of rose to the level of kind of getting me off the the home office setup, just because I can see so much more. I do feel like that was a big thing when driving down to BYU, and it's like, when you leave and you got to get through traffic, and you got to get to the game so early, and then like you're only limited really to watching like maybe a game and a half in addition to the one right in front of you. So it's just so much easier at home at times. So I'm gonna stay home, but some more columns on foxsports.com, and I'm excited because it's the football season now that we've had the upsets and we have the chaotic week. Like, it does feel like we're starting to settle in to what could be a very wild ride. I mean, we so many bubbles have been burst. I mean, everybody kind of thought this was going to be Alabama cakewalking to the national title again. That narrative has changed just a little bit based on what happened down there in Austin. So we'll see how our opinions change of teams as we get that extra data point this Saturday.
You can find all of that on both Collegiate Sports Connect, where we have some of more of Bryan's interview work. I think we should have some more stuff from me later this week. You'll have my dispatches from Washington, D.C. at extrapointsmb.com. I would say, yeah, looking at the schedule, this does seem like to be a good week to catch some of the app game, and then be a involved husband and father and catch up on some things around the house. But I also would have said that last week, and then shit got crazy. So there's probably going to be some other stupid game that happens here, because that is what happens to the sport. I don't know. Maybe Toledo and Ohio State are tied into the fourth quarter. I mean, I don't know how good Toledo is.
Hopefully not for your sake.
Oh boy. Hopefully not for my sake too. Although there's nothing wipes the frustration from a kind of uneven performance over Arkansas State. None of that gets wiped out of your mind more than watching everybody else kind of play with their food and lose. It's better to win by 28 and leave something hanging than to lose to Marshall. Folks, thanks for listening and everything. Check out our friends at homefieldapparel.com. We will catch up with you again soon. Thanks for listening.